In your work, have you done a lot of sort of travel research? I'm thinking about like Venice, Italy, places where they're sort of on the collective media front lines of sea rise solutions. What are your thoughts on that? Is there any takeaways? How does that incorporate into your work?
Absolutely. I do love traveling. And I think even before I was a specialist within the field, and as an architect traveling, you gain an appreciation for other cultures and their relationship with the built environment, and certainly living alongside or with the water is nothing new to civilization. And so observing how historically other cities, other communities develop their relationship along coastlines, along the water, with severe weather and severe sea level rise, and observing both the community's relationship as well as what the implementations have been for the infrastructure is always interesting. And I think for any architect in, whatever arena they specialize in or wherever they work, understanding how other cultures have developed that relationship, and it is one that is evolving, is super enriching. And to bring it back to, I grew up in Alaska. Yes, it's a relatively young state. Late 50s was formed, and we look at much of the infrastructure that's built there. I grew up in Anchorage, and just understanding it's on a fault line and what that infrastructure is, and that it is young. And then coming to New York, where many of the interventions have been around for hundreds of years, and then going to Europe, where it's thousands of years, understanding kind of the time continuum of what our interventions are, what materials have stood the test of time, what the new materials are doing, where there's application for them, or where we should really stick with basics, and the implications with the labor market certainly think is fascinating.
Could you expound on what sort of materials and technologies that are exciting you in terms of solutions?
Yeah, so just comparing to waterfront cities in Europe, whether it's locally made concrete mixes or looking in more urban dense environments where maybe you don't have horizontal room for the width of some of those structures that technically work, but the viability in more dense environments is that we want something a little bit leaner and lower profile. And we start looking at synthesized materials like FRP, understanding kind of the pros and cons, and also in terms of certainly the carbon footprint, the life cycle cost. And so those are all things that rapidly evolving materials, rapidly evolving technologies, the ways in which we can find applications in the clients who are willing to try those new materials is always interesting to balance.
Because I have to imagine your day-to-day is code switching between technology, design, municipalities, private business, right? Tell me a little bit about the pile of red tape and opportunities that you have to overcome on a daily basis.
Yes, there are. Certainly working on the waterfront, it's a highly regulated environment. I would actually argue it's the most heavily regulated, certainly in the country, in New York City, and if not the world. Just understanding that, for instance, when we work on a project in New York Harbor, we are putting in environmental and regulatory permits to federal agencies, state agencies, local municipalities. And in New York City's case, we're actually in the process on the consultant side of writing the first waterfront code that didn't previously exist. And for many years, the city of New York has been applying the building code as best they can to waterfront structures, which you can imagine there's some gray area, and
Right.
It's a little bit challenging both on the consultant side, also on the enforcement side to figure out how to negotiate that gray. And so the city is putting forth a waterfront code that we are contributing to, but that's the last piece of the last drop in the bucket. Before that, we go through the Army Corps, the Department of Environmental Conservation, Department of State. Oftentimes there are waterfront revitalization plans or coastal assessments that need to be deemed consistent with policies that have been set forth. And so we are actively working within that realm. But in terms of our work, our non-permitting work, we do, there's a lot of new research out there, a lot of new climate projections out in terms of what sea level rise will be. The codes typically are backwards looking. So that's something that we're working on, is the weather patterns of yesterday that the code are based on are not what we're experiencing today. And having clients that sometimes want to do the bare minimum, just what's required by code, versus educating and applying some common sense that that's what happened yesterday. It's not what's happening today. It's certainly not what's going to happen tomorrow, and trying to get a little bit more progressive beyond what's in the code to, again, help protect the health, safety, and welfare of the public in the built environment for a generation removed, which is largely what the infrastructure is designed for. Is not for today's individuals, but really for tomorrow's.
Sounds like you're the tip of the spear in terms of technologies shaping policy. What other, I don't know that much about like the world of architecture, and obviously obviously there's a lot of legal implications there, but I'd say working on a building versus working on what you do, it seems like there's a lot of opportunity to really blaze new trails, right?
That's certainly what we're experiencing. And it's a dynamic space to work in. It's a dynamic time to be working in the space. So certainly, I mentioned before, seeing the opportunity, having been one of the only architects in the room, if not the only architect in the room with a bunch of engineers, I think one of the fortes that architects bring to the table is really translating and applying some of the more technical concepts to the general public and for the betterment of the welfare of the public. And certainly, the opportunity is there, and we're seizing it and attracting a lot of really wonderful top talent while we're doing it.